It is that time of year once again. It is Halloween, and I figured what better way to celebrate this occasion than to review my personal favorite horror film of all time, the first horror film that I ever was interested in seeing, um, and that's Halloween. Personally, I don't really consider Halloween to be a slasher movie. I think that Halloween is the one horror film that is kind of different from all other slasher movies. It doesn't ride so much on what other slasher movies ride on, which is constant in your face blood and gore and breasts and sex and drugs and blood and intestines flying at you from all corners. Halloween doesn't do that. Halloween relies on the basic elements of a horror movie. What makes a good horror movie, and any true classic horror fan will tell you. There are good horror movies that have a lot of blood in them and are fucking gory as hell. Yeah, there's a lot of great movies. Having tons of blood and gore thrown in your face is, yeah, may disgust you and may make you feel sick to your stomach and be like, oh, that's disgusting, but that's not fear. That's not doing what a horror movie is meant to do. A horror movie is meant to scare you, not so much gross you out. I think people rely too much nowadays on trying to gross people out rather than actually scare them. Like, all right, we can't think of any good ways to scare them. We don't have anything going for us. We don't have atmosphere. We don't have suspense. We don't have anything like that. So, we might as well just throw a bunch of blood and gore in their faces, and then people think they're seeing a crazy horror movie. Like, oh my god, it was so bloody, you have to see it. Halloween's not like that. You have to pay attention to watch Halloween. Halloween was the first real successful independent horror film. It was the first real successful independent film in general. Um, Up until the Blair Witch Project came out in the late 90s, it held the title as the most successful independent horror film to date. And then you had Blair Witch Project in the late 90s, and then you had Paranormal Activity. You know, right now, Paranormal Activity is the most successful independent low-budget horror film ever made. Um, and the irony, I think, of each of those films is that Halloween, there's no blood and gore in it. It relies on atmosphere and, legitimately trying to freak you out and scare you. Blair Witch Project doesn't rely on any blood or gore or anything like that. It relies on atmosphere, suspense, and legitimately freaking people out. And Paranormal Activity, no blood, no gore, focuses on atmosphere, suspense, and legitimately freaking the audience out. You know, in my opinion, that's why a lot of people didn't like Paranormal Activities, because they're too brainwashed, in my opinion. By the constant that constant barrage of blood and gore being thrown in their faces, and stuff that you don't have to think about. Psychological horror the psychological horror movies have always proven to be the most effective. It's always 10 times scarier what you don't see. There's nothing more terrifying than the unknown. So the unknown that exists in the movie Halloween is Michael Myers and his agenda. It's like they say in Scream, it's always scarier when there's no motive, which is 100% true. One of the things that makes Halloween so scary is that we never find out why Michael Myers is killing all these people. We don't know what set him off. We don't know what his agenda is. We don't know what he is, because we're kind of led to believe that he's almost inhuman, and unstoppable and pure evil, which is one of the things that makes that movie so great. That and the atmosphere is amazing. The atmosphere being amazing is because of the amazing music. John Carpenter he directed it, and he wrote all of the music. Every piece of music that you hear in the Halloween movie, the original, is all written by John Carpenter and performed by John Carpenter. He sat in the studio and played the whole damn thing through the whole damn movie. So Halloween was one of the movies that it was very low budget, and it was an independent movie, but it became so successful because of the work that was put into it. They weren't having some computer nerd sitting at a computer, pressing a bunch of buttons and creating more computer generated blood and gore to throw in your face. You actually had to think to be scared. You had to pay attention to the movie to be scared. I think that's why modern horror fans and casual horror fans piss me off and irritate me so much, is because they're too lazy. They don't want to think to be scared. You know, they don't want to make the effort. You know, they're like, all right, I'm gonna sit down, watch this movie, and come on, just scare me. You know, and then if you're not thinking, if you're not paying attention, because you're just assuming that, oh, as soon as she closes this mirror, there's gonna be some fucked up face in the thing, and it's not gonna be real. There's gonna be some kind of loud noise that's gonna fucking make me jump out of my seat. You know, all of these false scares. You know, those loud noises are not scary. You know, they make you jump, but you're not being legitimately freaked out. So Halloween, as I said, was written and directed by John Carpenter. It was made for, it was very low budget. It was, I believe the original budget was like somewhere around 300,000, and the actual final budget ended up being about 325,000 dollars, mainly because of the casting of Donald Pleasance, who played Dr. Loomis in the movie. Um, Donald Pleasance's performance is absolutely, he steals the show with his performance. He's unbelievable. Um, he's done a great job in all the Halloween movies, even though he hasn't had much to work with in the later sequels, but he stole the show every time. This is also Jamie Lee Curtis's first film, her first on-screen appearance. After this, she became known as the Scream Queen. She was in several other horror movies after this, but those were just kind of like cash cows, just people trying to capture the same kind of magic that happened with Halloween, which nobody could ever do. If you're going into Halloween expecting, a bunch of loud noises, expecting to jump out of your seat, and just have a bunch of blood and gore thrown at you at 100 miles an hour every 5 seconds, you're not going to get it, and you're not going to be satisfied. But if you're a horror fan and you understand what makes a good horror film, and you want to be legitimately freaked out and scared, then you've got to sit down and pay attention and focus on this movie, because that's the only way you're going to understand it. That's the only way you're going to be affected by it. And it's definitely the perfect movie to watch on Halloween night. It's the perfect movie to watch at any time around Halloween night, So if you haven't seen Halloween, the original Halloween, don't fuck off all the other 4, 5, 6. Those are shits. If you want to watch the actual trilogy, the true Halloween trilogy of the main story that continues from the first one, you got to watch Halloween 1, 2, and H2O. Personally, I like to consider 4, 5, 6 as like a completely alternate universes, alternate reality, So if you haven't seen Halloween, check it out. It's one of the greatest horror films of all time.